why fund managers can't beat the S&P 500? Because they're sheep. And sheep get slaughtered.
The numbers told the story, they always do.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Because all we care about is getting fucking rich.
You connect points I don't even know to look for.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information.
Public's out there throwing darts at a board sport. I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things.
Welcome, Karma Nation. We are back. And by we, I mean me, Zach, and Corey. I've been traveling the world safely, ideally, during COVID, being forced to by other people in my life. But, we maintained a decent level the past week or, last 4 weeks that I've been gone. We've had other things going on. But this week, we have a special episode that we want to dive into every team in the NFL in regards to week 9, but also when to bet the teams, when to fade the teams, what key components are we looking for? Do we recommend you look for? Because I think we have enough information now through the first 8 weeks to really kind of tap into, which teams are bettable, which teams are not, what situations certain teams are bettable in, before we even consider a line or a number. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't really do often enough, is really kind of clarify the signals for each team versus just arbitrarily overweight variables that maybe are a lot of noise that don't, disguise what the signal really is. So with that, real quick, Corey, let's touch on our performance so far this season, including last week. How did you do last week in regards to also the season?
Yeah, so last week I didn't have the greatest of weeks. I found last week one of the toughest weeks of the season. Just a lot of games where I could go with either side, to be honest. And I was just kind of trying to determine which side was the stronger side. So, in the end, I think I ended out coming up just under 50%. But, on the year, I think I'm upwards of maybe 57, 58% on the year and up a good significant amount of units.
Yeah. Last week was the hardest week of the season for us, especially because we could really make a strong handicap for either side, which basically means there's not a lot of conviction. So we just got kind of stuck in that kind of way of thinking. So, our core portfolio in Bet Karma Discord went 3-1-1, which brings us to plus almost 5 units on the season. Which, considering how the season has gone, we're doing better than the overall market as we relate to the Super Contest top 5 consensus picks. So that's positive. Our aggressive portfolio's up, and it's a little more volatile, so we could have higher returns, kind of more shifts, ups and downs. So everything's looking good, looking strong there. But now that we have a lot of information about these teams and kind of like what they really are, I think we'll probably be even stronger down the stretch. And now that also we have more consistent schedules together. So with that, we want to get started right away on next week's games. And as we touch on next week's games, we might touch on week 8 a little bit, but we really want to kind of dive into where we see teams as a betting option and where we see teams as a fading option, more or less. So first and foremost, we'll start with Thursday night's game, Packers 49ers. What's your opinion on this? I know we have San Francisco Niners they lost Garoppolo, Kittle. Their wide receiver crew is now full of COVID. They've lost Ayuk and Samuel and Kendrick Bourne, it looks like. So for this game, what's your opinion on it, Corey, as far as how these teams match up now that the Niners have essentially lost, all their starters on offense and key positions, and obviously their defense has been decimated throughout the season?
Yeah, I think taking a look at it, to start the week, I definitely was looking to possibly back the Niners. I think just with a short week, traveling cross country, just with the COVID, all that going on, I just didn't think it was the greatest spot for the Packers, as well as San Fran's biggest strength offensively is their rushing attack, which is where Green Bay struggles. So I kind of looked at it as a spot where maybe this line is just a little bit overinflated, just general people's view on the Packers. And I didn't think the loss of Garoppolo necessarily at the start of the week was a huge loss in terms of this matchup necessarily, because they could lean on that schematic run game that they do a lot of games. So I kind of thought that, but as this week's went on, those cluster injuries at receiver, I think they've down another lineman. So it's just a lot of cluster injuries at this point. So it's a tough game. I think you got to really, it's hard to sometimes value, I think, those cluster injuries, because it's really hard to determine, because they compound, and it's just not as simple as this guy's worth a point. But if it's this guy and this guy, I mean, that can be worth 3 points in some cases, depending on how deep this team is at that position.
Yeah, their whole skill set is down to second or third stringers. I mean, that I don't even know. I don't think any team has had that extreme kind of just cluster injuries where, Kyle Shanahan obviously has proven, versus the Giants and the Jets that you can be a little bit decimated with injury and still kind of, put on a really good performance. But for this, Green Bay is obviously better than those teams. They have Aaron Rodgers. They laid a dead versus Minnesota, which, Minnesota coming off the bye. They know each other very well. Dalvin Cook ran it right down their throat. They got destroyed last year in the playoffs by the Niners. To me, this game seems like it's a perfect revenge spot, which I know is kind of a very loose, general, public type way of looking at it. But in the sense of maybe they were looking ahead to this game with that Vikings game. And now that they got beat up in the run game, literally 7 days ago, no, actually 4 days ago, I can't imagine that knowing that the Niners are going to run the ball, having played them last year in the playoffs, having just played Dalvin Cook, though it's a little bit different style of offense, that Green Bay is going to put in as bad as a defensive performance as they did versus the Vikings, versus the run game. And if the Niners can't run, what are they going to be able to do? So for me, I think this line's already been moving from 6 to over 7 now. I don't think there's any way you can back the Niners. I'm still considering actually taking the Packers, maybe even an alt line, take them at -8.5, 10.5 or something, whatever it is. Just because it seems like either Niners are going to play another Shanahan, just figures out how to run the ball against the Packers, or they're not going to be able to do anything. And I lean towards they may become the Cowboys this week. And it's not going to be because of the Packers defense. It's just because the Niners, like you said, just the cluster injuries. It's really unfathomable. I don't even know if I've seen a situation like this. So
Right.
as far as now into the next step and moving forward, what's your opinion on these two teams? Let's start with the Packers. When would you consider buying the Packers and consider playing them? And when would you think of fading them? Because I would have faded them in this game, like you said, if this San Francisco Niners team was healthy. Whether I play Niners or not, I don't know, but I definitely would not play the Packers if the Niners were healthy. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think the Packers in general are a team that kind of really rely on at least not having a big disadvantage on the line. I think last year we saw them, and even into this year, when they struggle on the offensive line or defensive line side of the ball, that it just doesn't go too well for them, and the game script can totally get flipped, as it did versus the Vikings falling behind, and that was the Vikings offensive line. And then when they went against Tampa Bay, that was more so Tampa Bay's defensive line dominating that. So obviously both games kind of just got flipped on their head from the very start, and just Green Bay never was really necessarily in either game for a good chunk of it. So I think that's kind of their biggest determining factor in most weeks.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, last week's game real quick is, Packers opening drive, touchdown, no problem. Vikings responded, touchdown. Packers next drive, touchdown. If they get one stop, it's a 14-0 game. Packers are playing position, you know what I'm saying? They were really one good drive stop away from potentially getting up enough to where now Minnesota's, changing their game plan, getting, desperate and basically playing outside of what they're good at. That's kind of what I see in this game is Packers are going to come out ready to play. They can't play on defense any worse than they played versus the Vikings. So I just don't see how the San Francisco 49ers put up points like consistently. So if Rodgers is just Rodgers that we've seen all season, especially early in games, I just see this as a great opportunity potentially for the Packers. And in general, to your point, I think the Packers, if there's a team that has the continuity to not even ruffle Rodgers a little bit, but just like get some stops. You can get some stops, and you can run the ball. You can dominate that line of scrimmage. Like, I don't think you can trust the Packers unless you're getting some like good points and you think Rodgers is going to keep you in the game, especially late. But Devontae Adams is like a one-man receiver crew right now. The running backs are banged up, so it's a tricky team to kind of bet right now. But I do still think the macro theme of Rodgers' revenge tour is still alive. So if you get any kind of good value, any good points, if this was a healthy Niners team and we were getting Green Bay, +3 or something, I think that's very playable potentially. But yeah, so on Green Bay, I think it's just you're betting on Rodgers and you're betting on if a team can actually run the ball or not against the Packers. And in this spot, without any dynamic to take the pressure off the Niners offense, I don't see how the Niners are going to run the ball versus the Packers very well, not like the Vikings.
Right. I got a little stat for you here that I think will make you like that Green Bay alternate line a little bit more. So between Green Bay and San Francisco this year, they've played a combined 15 games. 15 out of 15 times this season, those games have been more than 9 points or more off the spread. So there hasn't been a single game that's been within 8 points of the spread this season. So it's definitely a spot to try to look at for alternate value for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. And then on the Niners side, I don't think this team's so decimated. I think they're a fade the rest of the season. Like, I'm not saying you fade them every game, but just from a pick your spots when to fade them, because they've also tried, they unloaded their linebacker, Quan Alexander. So I wouldn't be surprised if Lynch and management is just saying, you know what, this isn't our season. Literally our entire team has been injured. Like, we're not going anywhere. So let's just get by. Let's get through the season. So you can't trust a team that management is let's just get through the season, guys. But Kyle Shanahan is a really good coach. So you have to find the right spots, but I would lean towards in the right spots fading them personally. Moving on. We have Seattle, Buffalo Bills. Seattle's at Buffalo. Buffalo's +3 now. It's moved up a little bit on Seattle, predictably probably so. What are your feelings on this game first?
Yeah, I think with this game, it's a little bit tricky. We've seen Buffalo the first 4 games of the year. I think they were averaging close to 30 points a game. And the last 4 games, they've averaged closer to 18 points a game. So who's the true Buffalo? You want to tend to lean towards what we've seen in the last 4 games. But I don't know. This Buffalo offense, this Buffalo team, I still think has talent. It doesn't seem to be really coming together so far this year. And the Seattle team plays everything close. So I think just from a matchup standpoint, I think Buffalo, there's potential that they can move the ball through the air in this game. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to back Buffalo. You're kind of banking on that these last 4 weeks haven't been the true Buffalo. And if it's a mix of the first 4 weeks and the last 4 weeks, then I think I like Buffalo in this spot. But if it's anything of these last 4 weeks, I think it's hard to step in front of Seattle with what they've been doing. But then at the same time, it's hard to take Seattle with just any sort of margin in a lot of spots.
Yeah.
Yes, this is only 3, but they play everything close. So
yeah, that's a very good point. Seattle is, we said this last year, you can't fade Seattle when they're getting points, and you can't bet Seattle when they're giving points. So it's very similar to this season, and it's because their defense hasn't been very good. But I think safety Jamal's coming back. I don't think they're getting Snack Harrison into play yet this week. But to me, my biggest issue in this game is Bills are just not that good. I think they were overrated. They didn't play really strong competition to start the season, and they had the continuity greater than anyone in the NFL. So if anyone had an advantage to start the season, it was the Buffalo Bills. Well, now the NFL's catching up. Now the other teams are having opportunity to get situated, to get better, to get like if you had the Bills versus the Bucs right now in a neutral field, in a sense, do Bills have any chance? Like, is Josh Allen gonna like tear up the Bucs defense and Tom Brady gonna suck versus the Bills defense? Like, absolutely not. Maybe week 1, Bills had a good shot, but we're not in week 1, right? We're in the continuity now is gone. Like the edge the Bills had has vanished. And to me, depending how much you believe Josh Allen is a good quarterback versus an average or bad quarterback is where you position the Bills. I don't love the spot for Seattle, and it's -3. But if you tease Seattle, get them to +3, +4, I mean, I would take that all day, 2 times on Sunday. Like, there's no Russell Wilson with points versus suspect Bills D. Like, I feel like you'd have to take that. So I definitely lean Seattle, though I don't love the spot for Seattle. But I don't think you can trust the Bills at only +3. If it was +4, I would consider it. But I'm not a Josh Allen believer. And moving on to when can you bet the Bills on the season? I mean, I feel like you can only bet the Bills when they're playing a very average to below average offense, because Josh Allen is not going to go toe-to-toe and put up 38 points like he did versus the Rams. That was kind of a fluky game, and Bills lucked out in the end. I don't think that's going to happen very often. He's not that good of a quarterback to do that consistently. So if you're playing a good offense like Seattle, it's either Seattle or off, in my opinion. So what do you think about the Bills?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the Bills. I don't see too many buy spots in general with them, I think, for the rest of the season. This defense, I mean, it's bottom 10 in the league right now. And, I mean, that's just the big surprise, I think, so far. You would have thought that this defense was going to be top 10 probably going into the year. They returned a lot of their pieces, just the continuity factor, just all of that going for them. And they've just really underperformed. And Josh Allen's not the quarterback, like you said, to go toe-to-toe with other stronger quarterbacks. So I think it takes average to below average. I mean, most of the time, probably a below average team to ever want to probably consider the Bills too often.
Well, yeah. And remember, this is a team that, I mean, they only scored 18 points and field goals against the Jets. I mean, there's not a lot of dynamic. You know, if Josh Allen cannot make the big play down the field, they're okay. Now, Zach Moss is getting healthy. They're probably going to be able to run the ball more consistently, a little better. So that's something to look out for. But, yeah. And for Seattle, I know we think we can't take the margin, but they were up 37-20 versus Arizona. 49ers. You know, they've been up big in games. It's just they can't close because their defense hasn't been very good. But I think that defense, like, it can only improve on the season, right? Like, I mean, I just feel like as far as moving forward, like, can you bet Seattle if you're giving up a couple points? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, like what is the threshold of, well, I can't give up 6 with Seattle, but I can give up 3. I can give up, you know, like, obviously it depends on the spot. But I just don't trust the Bills to take advantage of the Seattle defense personally.
Right.
Yeah. And I think Seattle's like team makeup and chemistry is only going to improve, because I don't think the offense is going to stop. Like, the offense, they know what they are. They're confident. Russell's confident. So it's really the defense just has to kind of come around a little bit, which if they get a little healthier and they get those players in, that should happen. So I don't know. I just see Seattle as, like, any good opportunity you have with Seattle, to me, is a potential bet on team, barring it being like a 7-point spread or, you know, et cetera.
I think that's very true, because, I mean, Seattle's one of the teams I would trust most in the NFL just not to lay a dud from week to week. Them probably along with Kansas City. And that's a lot to be said just to Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes, just knowing that they're not going to let their team just go out and lose by 20 points. So, I mean, I think to what you said about Seattle is very true.
Okay, cool. And so Denver, Atlanta, this game I don't have too strong of an opinion on, other than I don't think the Broncos are actually very good, and I think Atlanta has the talent superior to Denver at this moment in time. I liked Atlanta a lot when the line was, I think, was it 2.5 at 1.3? Now it's -4. So I definitely lean Atlanta. Broncos, I mean, they were losing, 24-3 to the Chargers at home, 50 yards of offense compared to the Chargers' 360 yards of offense by like halfway through the third quarter. And then it flipped. And then all of a sudden Denver got a touchdown, got a turnover, got a touchdown, and somehow pulled out that victory. So to me, this Denver team is just not very, like, they're genuinely just not very talented of a team, a very good team. Their defense is okay. They run the ball okay. Drew Lock occasionally makes a decent pass. That's about it. Whereas the Falcons, I mean, they have Matt Ryan. They have Julio. They have some defensive presence. They've gotten better. And Atlanta's coming off, an extended break. That's when Atlanta shores up their defense every season. I don't know why, but that seems to be when it happens. So to me, it's Atlanta or bust in this game. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's Atlanta or bust as well. I think the big thing here is we can't let maybe those first couple games, what Atlanta showed us, bleed into too far into the season. And I mean, to be fair to Atlanta, I think a lot of things didn't go their way early on. I mean, versus the Bears, we know what happened there. Versus the Cowboys, we know what happened there. And then even versus Seattle, they had some unfortunate like turnover and fourth down things not go their way. So I think in general, this Falcons team is better than what their record shows. And then even furthermore, since they made the coaching change, this team could easily be 3-0. It's just that play from Gurley or the last second throw from Stafford away from them being 3-0. And I don't know, Denver's not a team I trust at all. Drew Lock, he's just not he's a bottom 10 quarterback. And I think a lot of people, this line I think would have ballooned a lot, not a lot higher, but a little bit higher if they didn't, perform or come back to even win that game. If they lose that game by 6, I'm not sure we even see this number. So I think with that being said, it's Atlanta or bust for me.
Yeah, and I agree. And moving forward, I think Atlanta, so it's twofold. To me, Atlanta's a buy-on team right now. Moving forward, the only issue is their next 5 of 7 games after this is KC, Saints, Tampa, so they play the best teams in the NFL, more or less. So that's going to be a sticky situation. I think in the right situation, you're going to be able to get Atlanta +7 versus one of those teams in the right spot. You want to hit that. I think this one, this is a great one to tease. I think Atlanta wins straight up if you want to money line it. I'm not even that scared of the -4 really, because I don't trust Drew Lock to really kind of like cover versus a Falcons team that struggles to win by margin. So yeah, I think this team we had pegged at like 7 to 9 wins. And they've obviously like shit the bed in 3 of those games that they should have won. So, this is the Falcons game. Like, to me, the only way they lose is if Matt Ryan or Julio gets injured during the game. It's probably actually like my play of the week, if I'm honest. Like maybe not at -4, but if I bought down to -3, maybe the money line. But yeah, Denver moving forward. Do you have any pulse on this team? Like, I don't think I could back this team again. I think they're, unless you're getting a lot of points at home,
yeah, I think with Denver, and this goes for a lot of years, it's a lot of situational spots, kind of with that home field advantage, as well as just the travel, just all that stuff. I think it's situational a lot of times when people are betting Denver in general, and especially with a team that you can't really trust their offense. Their defense is pretty solid though. So I think if you can find the right situational spot, I can bet Denver, but for the most part, I think this team, it's mostly given sell signs at this point.
And I got a good one. If Philip Lindsay is going to be the quarterback, the lead running back, he's the heart of this team, according to pundits online. And I think that's probably true too. So if they have a good running matchup where Lindsay might have a solid game, I think that kind of feeds the team's kind of like identity. So if you find a good spot with Denver matching up with someone that they can run the ball on with Lindsay, I think that could be an opportunity, but just putting that in the universe. So next up, we got Chicago Bears at Titans. It's an interesting matchup, weird matchup. Seems like 2 teams from 2 different universes, but it's -6 Tennessee at home. What's your feelings on this game?
So I saw this line come out and I was really surprised. Catching that many points with Chicago versus this Tennessee team hasn't got margin all season, and they're not a team just in general built to get margin just because of that defense. The defense has been pretty poor, and if they don't they just lack pressure on the quarterback, so that allows slightly below average quarterbacks. If they have time, a lot of quarterbacks can kind of perform better than they typically would. So I think with that, being said, if you're laying too many points with the Titans, I just naturally got to lean towards the Bears here. But this Bears offensive line, that's the one thing that's worrying me. They do have, I think maybe they're down to maybe one starter on that offensive line. But I think about it, and that looks very similar to what Cincinnati had last week. Now, I don't trust the Bears offense maybe quite as much as Cincinnati's, but I do think Chicago has a significantly better defense than the Bengals. So I think catching the points here, I still think the Bears probably the right side, but the Titans are getting a couple players back. I think they just traded for a corner, and Adoree Jackson might be back as well. So those are all things to monitor too.
Yeah, and I love game comps. This kind of like you almost convinced me that the Bears was the right side here. But then when I thought about it, it almost, to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, it almost feels like this Bears game is similar to that Bears at the Rams game. Like, I know Rams have a much better defense, but it just seems, I don't know, like out of, yeah, maybe not. Yeah, Titans don't have that kind of defense. So, yeah, and Tannehill has actually shown some wrinkles in his game. I mean, last week versus the Bengals, he was pretty average for most of the game. So, I mean, I guess if Foles can play well, but there's also a lot of dissension amongst the team with that offense and Nick Foles and the Mitch Trubisky and like the wide receivers. Like there's a lot of controversy, because the team knows they're not as good as their record. Like they know they're trending down. Like they know they can't score points. So I don't know. It's just like, can you trust the Bears to like have a solid game? Because even versus the Panthers game, when I was highly on the Bears in that situation, they should have won by 17 if they were just like a little more competent. Not even better, like just a little more buttoned up, especially on offense. And they didn't. They had an opportunity to really, take care of the game, put it away, but they couldn't do it. And there's something not right in the water with that offense and with Matt Nagy and Nick Foles, et cetera. And that's where, in theory, Bears should be able to put up some points against the Titans. Like Nick Foles is capable. We've seen this offense, but I don't trust that they can do that. Like kind of like when they played the Rams. Rams defense isn't that good. Like they can be scored on down the field, but the Bears couldn't do it. They were terrible. So I don't know. It's just kind of mixed vibes in this game, so I'll probably lay off it. But moving forward, what's your vibe on the Bears? Is there any opportunities to bet on them? Do you lay off them, or what do you think?
I just wanted to add one more thing about the Bears and Nick Foles. I think one thing for him is the pressure. In the games where we've seen success from him this year, it's versus when he came in versus the Falcons or versus the Panthers. By far, two of the weaker defensive lines they faced this year. Where they haven't seen success, they've actually faced some very tough defensive lines. The Colts, the Buccaneers, the Rams, and the Saints. So you think of that, that's four of probably the top 10 defensive lines on the season. So I think that's just a big part of how this Bears offense maybe moves the ball. And if we look at Tennessee's defensive line, they rank 32nd against the pass this year, dead last. So I think this Bears offense, if it weren't for those offensive linemen being out, that's what we're really going to have to look into. But otherwise, I think I'm all in on Chicago on this game. If I truly believe they can score points, I think their defense is good enough to slow this Tennessee offense just enough.
Yeah, I do agree with that latter point.
Yeah. So in terms of, you said Chicago, buy, sell rest of the season?
Yeah. Is there any kind of spots you think? I mean, obviously their defense kind of leads the way, but it's actually, and I'll touch on that real quick. So it's why I backed the Bears so kind of clearly versus the Panthers is, to me, you can only back the Bears in situations where their offense will be able to put up points against a bad defense. So, like Corey just mentioned, playing the Bucs, you can't back them. Like in that game, you could because of the situation of the Bucs injuries, but in general, you wouldn't want to back them there. You don't want to back them at the Rams, even getting the 6, because the pressure up front, the offense is going to get wonky. They're not going to score. Colts, same thing. Strong defense. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to be able to put up any points. They're not going to be able to be competitive, and it's put a lot of pressure on the defense that, they're going to give up 20 points. Like, they're not going to give up 40 points. But the defense gives up, 17 to 24 points. Like, that's about where that defense is. Can the Bears score 17 to 20 points? That's the question you have to ask yourself in that game. Versus the Panthers, the answer is yeah. Of course they can score 17 to 20 points. About what they did. And they won by like 6-7 points. So that to me is kind of when you want to bet the Bears. And if you don't think they're going to be able to score that amount of points, you have to lay off or go the other direction. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty true with Chicago. It really comes down to if that offense is going to be able to put up enough production, because their defense isn't going to let up too many teams past maybe the mid-20s. So, I mean, if this offense can find 20 points, I think they're going to be very competitive, and they'll cover the number for you more times than not. And that's what's shown so far this season. So
yeah. And for the Titans, is there any kind of bet on or off? Like you said, that defense is pretty bad, but I mean, they traded for King from the cornerback from the Chargers. They have Clowney. I mean, he's non-existent, I guess. Do we see any improvement coming from that defense? Because we know what the offense can do.
you'd like to think so. I think just looking player by player, it looks like this defense should be performing better than it is. So I think it's a team where you got to be maybe careful how much you bet on or against maybe for the time being, if those new players are coming in and starting right away. It's not necessarily something I want to totally try to make a prediction on, because it's just this defense has really underperformed so far. So I think, as we saw last week versus the Bengals, this Tennessee team doesn't get pressure on quarterbacks, and that's how Cincinnati got success. So I think that's a big part to it, because Tennessee's going to get their points. They're pretty good with Henry and getting the play action out of that. So it really comes down to their defensive performance.
Gotcha. Okay. Lions, Vikings, Stafford's out. Galladay's out. Obviously can't back the Lions here. Vikings figured out what kind of team they are, I think, during the bye week. I mean, they always knew what team they were, but they didn't really put the pieces completely together, I feel like, until that game. So I think whatever this line is, it's Vikings are off. Unless it's like 13, maybe. I don't know. What's your any opinion on this?
My guess is it comes around 8.5, maybe 9. I think it stays under 10, to be honest. Minnesota does match up really well with Detroit offensively. They should be able to run the ball much like they did versus the Packers last week. And I'm not sure, I mean, with Galladay out in the first place, I wasn't too sure how much success Detroit would have offensively. They've kind of struggled. But Detroit's a team that's played well versus the bottom teams and really struggled with those top teams. Where does Minnesota fall? Probably somewhere in between that. So it was going to be hard to gauge Detroit. But I think with Driscoll or Blau at quarterback, I mean, that's a significant 4, 5, 6 point downgrade from Stafford. So I think that's a spot where, I agree with you. I think the Vikings, I may look to maybe try to tease it. I think getting the Vikings, if you can get it under 3, I think that's a really strong play, because I think this Vikings team is still playing hard, especially coming off a win versus Green Bay. Yeah.
And on the Lions, and I agree with all of that. I think we moved to the macro points. On Lions for the season, I'm not sure you can back this team the rest of the season. And so you may have to fade them the rest of the season. We've seen this the last 2 years, especially last year. This team crapped out after week 8. After Stafford's injury, just the rest of the season, they were worthless. Now, they did cover and win a couple games. You know, I think they covered. I don't think they won 1 or 2 games the rest of the way. But they're not trustworthy. When you have a terrible defense, when you don't have your quarterback playing, when you have these kind of like big key issues and your coaching's bad, the variables are too volatile to comfortably take a position on that team. So it's actually better to find opportunities to fade that team. Like you said, like I wish Stafford was playing, because I think we'd get a better line, and I would have taken it. I would have taken under 6 if Stafford was playing. But now they're going to inflate the line. It's like, is it going to hit this game? Whatever. So yeah, moving forward, Lions for me, I think you just look for spots to fade them. I think Patricia is going to be on his way out. I think the team, they don't even look like they have the fire of last season, and that's concerning to me. Like, just
I think Detroit has a issue with their culture. I think this roster definitely has talent, and it doesn't have the talent of maybe a 1-15, 2-14 team, but they definitely seem to have the culture of a 2-14 team, just in general. And they're just a team. It's still kind of Detroit, and it's just, I don't know. They just don't show up a lot of weeks. And I just think with, like you said, the coaching issues, and it just seems like a team that just doesn't have the culture, and that's big in the NFL. So I think it's a team where we'll probably look to bet against more. But yeah, you'll see your weeks from Detroit where they give you glimmers of hope because they do have talent. I think I really do believe they probably have close to average talent in the NFL, but they've just been performing like a fringe bottom 10 team, and I wouldn't be surprised if that continued.
Yeah, for sure. And on Vikings on the season, honestly, I think Vikings are a bet-on team, and it's not just because of last week's Green Bay game. It's because of the Seattle game. It's because of the Texans game. Like they put in 3 actually like really good performances, more or less, and that's a mark of a team that's well coached, which they are, which we know. Mike Zimmer is a covering machine, and the market has like they're going to beat the Lions, fine, whatever, but it's still the Vikings. They still can't get the bad taste out of their mouth getting, walloped first week of the season, getting walloped by the Colts. And so I think, Vikings the rest of the season, like if they were going to play Green Bay a third time, I'd be like, I think Vikings might be the better overall team, including coaching, than the Packers, because they just know who they are. They know what they're good at. They know what they're not good at. They're just going to keep kind of grinding away as we see every season. Obviously, their defense is a little suspect, so they run into a team like, obviously the Chiefs or something. No, but I think for the most part, this is a great team to look for opportunities to bet on.
Yeah, I think the Vikings are a team that I'll be looking to, bet on. I think early on, just those first couple of games, people really downgrade the Vikings. And I know we kind of, from the very start, we're not very high on the Vikings. And I'm not saying that we're now really high in the Vikings by any means, but I don't think they are they're probably a pretty average team, honestly, in the NFL, and they're not that fringe bottom 10. And some people are throwing them even close to bottom 5 at some points to start that season. So I think with that, the market's going to take some time to maybe really figure out this Vikings team. I think it's important to know, too, Zimmer's defensive schemes has always been known to be very complicated and hard. So it takes a team some time. And they had a lot of new pieces on that defense. So it's gelling more and more. And it's shown on the scoreboard. So I think that's something that we'll see more as the season goes. And yeah, I think they're definitely a team to look to bet on.
Nice. All right, Ravens Colts. This is an interesting one. Colts are +2. I know they're at home, but I don't know how the Ravens line is this short. Like for me, I don't value home field like other people. I would have the Ravens at least at 3, if not 3.5, 4, because Phillip Rivers is the quarterback of the Colts team, of an offense that's not very dynamic. It's getting a little better, but it's a lot of no-name running back receiver types, just kind of occasionally making a play, whatever. I don't know how you make the case for the Colts here other than the obvious Ravens injuries on offensive line, which maybe does come into effect here. But with the Ravens defense, I just don't see how the Colts really put a lot of points on the board here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think both defenses probably have a little bit of an edge here. And I think the concern, this line, I mentioned to someone earlier this week, if this line holds at 3 or stays under 3, or if it holds at 3, I don't really know if there's a spot to take the Ravens. But I think with this moving down, I think that makes maybe more of a spot to take the Ravens. I think this team there's a lot of injury concerns here, and I think that's what people are mostly selling themselves on. And this Ravens team, we can't forget, they outgained, I think, the Steelers by close to 250 yards last week. So the big struggle was, this Pittsburgh aggressive blitzing defense, and that's what caused 4 turnovers. And now that's not something we can ignore, because that's going to be something that the Ravens are prone to, just with a quarterback like Lamar and how he runs the ball and throws the ball. So I think that can't be ignored. But we look at the Colts, and yes, they have a strong defense, but they're not a defense that likes to blitz. I don't have the number in front of me, but I know they're not a defense that tends to blitz. They're not quite as aggressive. They're much more conservative and just play a solid form of defense. So I think with that being said, I think the Ravens are the right side in this game. And yeah, I think this is it's a good spot, a bounce back spot for the Ravens. But I think a lot of people are starting to believe the Colts are maybe even a top 5 team. And I'm with you. I don't buy it. I don't think Phillip Rivers is that talented anymore. So I think this is Ravens. Yeah.
And this is like the optimal buy low, sell high, one team versus the other spot. Like, every year, every week, like you have these iconic situations where it's almost so obvious you feel stupid for thinking that that is going to be the case again. And like, I don't have the numbers, but it's almost always is. Like, it's the Ravens lost a game they should have won, division rival, tough game. Colts dominated a game that got out of hand. They didn't really win by 3 touchdowns. Like, one sack strip fumble by Darius Leonard turned into a Colts touchdown that flipped the game in the Colts' favor, and then it was over. So, it's just like, to me, like, Ravens under -3 is like, I just like have to take it. Like, Lamar Jackson, one big play, and like, okay, they're gonna win the game, like, no problem. So on the season, I think Ravens, I don't know if they're a bet on team in general. It's really about their defense to me. Like, they should have beat and covered the Steelers just because of their defense, just because of how well their defense played overall. So that to me is the bet. Like, if they went up against the Steelers because of the turnover machine that the Steelers can create, then you're getting a little sketchy. But besides that, I mean, imagine the rest of the season, the teams they play, besides the inflated lines like -13 versus the Bengals type stuff, if they're under a touchdown, I mean, I don't love the Ravens, but I feel like you have to bet them the rest of the season. Almost every week, blindly. If it's under 7, just bet them. Like, besides playing the Steelers, maybe, and they already played the Chiefs, like, I just don't know what spots should you not play them. With that defense, and obviously Lamar can make big plays occasionally down the field and obviously with his legs.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think the Ravens are going to be a team to look to bet on just in general, because I think people are really losing belief in the Ravens. We're looking at the Seahawks, the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, and I think everyone kind of forgets about Baltimore. And I think with that being said, though, I think Baltimore still has some value even above 7, because those are generally teams that they can bully. And in the past, they've really tended to try to bully those teams. They're not scared to run up the score. They're one of the 3 teams probably in the NFL that really just generally will try to run up the score if they can. Now, they're struggling with it this year, but I mean, even against Washington, they were up 21 late in that game. I think before RG3 came in, turned it over, whatever, they won by 14. Versus Cincinnati, we saw them absolutely bully them 27-0. So I think if they can exert their will on a team and play from ahead, that's where you really want to be able to play on the Ravens, when they're playing from ahead. With that being said, it's tough to know how the Ravens maybe are reacting, because it's a very smart organization. They look at analytics. They just really look at everything. So is this a situation where the Ravens are going to really start trying to use Lamar Jackson in passing situations more just to get through those growing pains? I know this is something we've mentioned in some previous podcasts. Get through those growing pains now so they hopefully can see success in the playoffs, because right now this team is not going to be able to keep up with the Chiefs. So it's just a spot where you kind of wonder, are they going to try to use this as a learning curve and just kind of work through some pains? And I think they'll pick their spots for that, because obviously they're not just going to take this season and look at it as a rebuild. Let's get Lamar better next season. But I think you really got to be thinking about that in certain spots. So
yeah, and to that point, this is this is a must-win game for the Ravens as far as a playoff implication. So,
right. Yeah. I don't think they're doing as much experimenting in this game.
In the next game, let's touch on the Colts. So, for the bigger picture of the season, do you have a good pulse on the Colts? I mean, to me, the biggest key right now is Leonard.
Yeah. I can't say I have a strong pulse on the Colts, I don't think. They're a team where I'm still kind of figuring out. They've laid some really impressive games where they just go out and dominate a team like they did versus Detroit the week before. And then even games versus like when they went to Chicago and they kind of dominated Chicago in that same way. So I think they're a team I'm still trying to figure out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think really this defense is what's key to this team. You know, you can't trust Phillip Rivers. Their offense is a little like between the 20s style offense. You know, like they don't typically make big plays. I will say their running backs actually, besides Jonathan Taylor, have actually looked pretty good, kind of like an Eckler effect. So if they have a good matchup against linebackers or, really just linebackers down the field type stuff, their running backs can take advantage. So that's something I think where you could consider if there's a good matchup there that you could bet the Colts, especially because you can't trust Phillip Rivers. So throwing to, backs out of the backfield against linebackers is obviously safer than down the field with safeties watching him and that noodle arm. Next up, let's go to Panthers Chiefs. So when I saw this line, it's 10.5. I was like, give me Panthers all day, every day, right now. Give me, like, I don't know why, like, I get why this line is so high, but why is it so high? Like, this, to me, this line is based on, whoops, guys. We were wrong. Panthers are bad. We forgot. Like, they won a few games, but they're actually bad. Now, I know their defense isn't good, but I'm not sure Panthers aren't going to, like, score 30 points on the Chiefs. Like, Christian McCaffrey's coming back. He should be back anyways, word on the street. Teddy Bridgewater is very capable. And this is a complete, like, are Chiefs motivated for this spot? Like, they just dominated the Jets. This is an NFC game versus a bottom-feeding team. Hey, we've seen the Chiefs lay these type of eggs before. Like, they don't, like, how much do they care? Like, and Patrick Mahomes is going to try to do his flashy big plays, blah, blah, blah. So if Panthers get any kind of stops, any kind of pressure, any kind of turnovers, to me, this game's probably going to cover easier than we even think. But that's just my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're looking at two advantage offenses for both teams. We have some of the craftiest play callers in Reed, Rule, and Brady. I always get worried to step in front of Kansas City. I mean, they are 15-2 against the spread in their last 17. So they're just on a really crazy run right now. And even on this season, if we just look at margin of win, of their, I think, 7 wins, I think 6 of them have been by 2 scores or more. So we're looking at a Carolina team that I think is definitely trending downward. Now they do get McCaffrey back, but how important is McCaffrey? Is that necessarily a boost in the first week back? They actually struggled with him a little bit, or they didn't play as well, I guess, with him maybe the first 2 weeks of the season. And now I know that's not a very big sample size. Can't really put too much weight into that. But are they going to try to force things to him a little bit more? Is it just an added kind of elephant in the room? And then I look at Kansas City just from a motivational standpoint. Yes, I typically agree with you, but I do wonder, I think this could be a spot where we see them maybe come on and play pretty well because they are looking at a bye next week. So with no look-ahead spot, this is kind of a, hey, let's put up a good win. We get 2 weeks off. Wouldn't be surprised if they put up a good performance. So I'm leaning towards Kansas City at this point.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think you're right. I think, man, it's just hard to lay those points because to me, the Panthers are the perfect type of team that if your defense is a little average, like they will backdoor cover you. Like, so I'm not saying that you should play the Panthers because of a backdoor cover, but this game screams to me you can't play the Chiefs because this is the type of game where you will actually get backdoor covered. So Chiefs, I think you're right. I think Chiefs probably look really good, dominate the game, up 31-17. Panthers get a touchdown with a minute left. Like that type of thing. Yeah. So that's just kind of my overall view on this. And moving forward for the Panthers, I still think, and I agree, I think they peaked, but I think getting CMC back will kind of rejuvenate the team a little bit, get them kind of back in. And I actually think they learned how to play Joe Brady's offense without CMC. And because of who CMC is, I think, I have nothing to go on this, but a feeling is he's going to be integrated into this offense more than they're going to revert back to CMC being the feature of everything, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, because you were gone, I learned how to do this thing on my own. Now I can cook on my own. Now when you come back, I don't need you to cook for me. I'll cook for you. That's kind of how I see it happening, especially with kind of CMC's kind of disposition and how he handles himself. He's not really a prima donna type guy. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. So it actually may have been a blessing in disguise, which I think we'll learn here. I think if Panthers put up 30 points with CMC back in the lineup, and even if he has a big day, I think that's going to show us that this offense knows what it is, and it's just putting a better player in a key position. And that's ultimately to their benefit. So something to monitor for sure. And for Chiefs, I mean, obviously, like you said, why would you get in front of this train? Like 17-2, ATS. I mean, we know why the Raiders happened. We know why the Chargers happened. But how often do you really want to fade this team? Like, just look for opportunities to buy them. +4 at the Ravens, just buy it. Like, why get in front of the freight train, right? Is that kind of your position on?
Yeah, I think it's just a hard spot. I mean, even when you think you're getting a good spot, Mahomes and this offense is so good. And I know that sounds really square, but I mean, it's showing up in the numbers. I mean, the market's taken a while to catch up to them, and some want to believe it's caught up, but I mean, they're still 6-2 against the spread this year after finishing last year on a 9-0 run. So yeah, I think it's a really hard team to step in front of, but not saying you can't do it, because those sometimes can be some of the sharpest plays.
That's a good point. Moving on, Texans at Jags. It's kind of a toilet bowl here we got. -6.5 Texans on the road at Jacksonville. Interesting. I believe, right? Oh, yeah, it's because Minshew got benched. Jags are obviously somewhat largely dysfunctional. Texans aren't so good themselves. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, so I initially saw the number and I was like, give me Houston. I think they're a team that's trending upwards and Jacksonville's trending downwards. And I just thought anything under a touchdown, I think Houston's going to get their points in this. But then I thought about it more and I'm like, this number probably isn't as indicative of kind of the quarterback change, because Minshew had looked pretty bad this season. I saw his last 2 games and he was not hitting throws that he should have. So I'm not sure how much of a downgrade this really is. So I think in that, I'm not huge to jump on Houston here, especially because Jacksonville, their strength is the rush game. They rank 12th in the rush, whereas Houston actually ranks 27th versus the rush. And I know that maybe skewed a little bit from a game here, game there, but Jacksonville should see some success on the ground here, which is, I think, very big when you're bringing in a quarterback for the very first time. So I'm not saying Jacksonville's going to see a ton of offensive success, but it's always a good sign when you're not absolutely going to get your run stuffed, and then it's going to be on the quarterback's arm when it's his very first game out. But I still lean with Houston in this spot, but it's not super strong. I think it's a great opportunity again for Houston to just kind of, exert their will through the passing game. They almost did the last time they played, but I know that game was really it was a very weird game. Houston ended up winning by, I think, 16, but it could have been a lot closer, to be honest. I think there were some weird turnovers in that game, but Jacksonville's had some injuries since then. I know in that game they were missing a couple pieces too. So in the end, I slightly lean to Houston.
Yeah, if Minshew was playing, I think I would like the Jags, regardless of Minshew's kind of issues. But with this new quarterback, I just don't have any sense of how good or not he is, or in this spot, if this is going to be a good spot for him. So, yeah, I think it's Texans are off, though. I don't love the number on the Texans. But for the season, Texans, like you said, I agree. I think they're trending up. I think they're a bet-on team the rest of the season. Like, if they play the Titans again, give me Texans. If they play the Colts again, consider the Texans. I'm not saying blindly, but there's a level of they bottomed out in the beginning of the season. I think Watson's only going to be more kind of like free-flowing, which is where I think he excels, is as you saw last year. And the perfect example is, high stakes, playoffs. Texans were awful the first half versus the Bills. What happens when the leash comes off, so to speak, the chains come off? Watson becomes a magician and magic starts to happen. The problem is they keep putting the chains back on him every week, almost every first half, except versus the Steelers. At some point, I think that, whether by his demand, and hopefully we start actually seeing some of this play out, he's going to be unleashed and just let him play. Let him lead. Don't try to run the ball on first down every drive like they do with David Johnson, who's a terrible running back, and actually just let Watson run the offense. And if they do that, this team's going to be a very strong potential bet on the rest of the season. Anything to add for you, Corey?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with Houston. I think the only thing I add with Jacksonville is it's a team I think I just kind of want to – if I had to pick, do I want to bet on or bet against for every game the rest of the season, it's definitely against. And I think just in general, these teams that are just kind of lack motivation, this was a team that was supposed to be really bad. They came out with 2 pretty good performances versus the Colts and Titans to start the year. But now we've looked at their last 5 games, and they failed to cover by 6 points or more in all 5. So I think it's a team that's just trending downward. They really can't stop anyone. It's looked pretty bad in that aspect the last couple of weeks. Chargers, I know, scored almost 40. I think the Lions maybe almost scored 40. So this is a team. The Chargers and Lions, yeah, they have decent offenses, but it's nothing explosive. So that's kind of where I think Houston's going to come out, and they're going to get at least 30. So do I trust Jacksonville to maybe score 3 with this rookie quarterback? I don't. So I think that's why I lean with Houston in this spot.
Very good point. Giants at Washington. This line was +3 on Giants. Now it's moved to +2.5. I like the Giants here. Again, I still think I'm holding out a sliver of, not hope, I don't really care. But I think Giants could win this division. I think Giants might actually be, ironically enough, the best overall team in this division. Despite Danny Dimes being very inconsistent and most of the time just bad. So what do you think about this matchup, rematch?
Yeah, I think, in this spot, this is a game that I actually already bet Giants +3.5. I think if you're catching anything field goal or more, you have to take that team. We look at their first matchup, and what's really changed since then? I can't really say much of anything has. Still have pretty much the same, outlook maybe on both teams. Both teams have probably trended a little bit upwards, but I can't really say either team's trended up a lot more. And in the first matchup, we saw the Giants favored by 3. So now all of a sudden we're flipping it all the way. And I understand home field advantage, but we're flipping this all the way 6 points almost. I know we're going through 0, but I think just from looking at it in that aspect, this is a game, I think it's a coin flip. I think this Giants team played probably their best game of the season last week versus the Buccaneers. And I think I would like to think that they still believe they could win this division, and they really just showed they could play with the top team possibly in the NFC. So I think in that, I think both teams still come into this game motivated. Washington does come in off a bye, but I'll take the points with the Giants in this matchup as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think both these teams are bet on the rest of the season potentially. I know Washington had a big injury to Landon Collins, I believe. If Kyle Allen's quarterback, I think he's very capable. He's underrated. He'll always be underrated, and he gets made fun of all the time. But, they have some playmakers, McLaurin. They have running backs. They can score better than I think even most people even think. Logan Thomas has been a decent tight end this season. And obviously their defensive front with Chase Young, et cetera, is very capable of making big plays and getting turnovers. So, and with the Giants, Giants are, I call them my most underrated unit in the NFL is the Giants defense. They have, Bradbury, they have playmakers, they have guys that can step up and hold teams to 20 points a game. And if you can that's as good as it's going to get, more or less. So honestly, the Giants have been doing that all season. They did to Dallas. They held them in check. They should have won that game. Could have beat the Bucs. Right there with the Bears. This team is a closeted average team, but Danny Dimes is not and has not been good. That's really been their Achilles heel. So if he improves at all, this team could win the next 4 out of 6 games. So just food for thought. Raiders, Chargers. Any opinion on this game? It's 0. It's a pick 'em.
So this is one I definitely need to look into a lot more. Just looking at a matchup standpoint, I'll lean with the Chargers in this one. Chargers' strength is their passing offense. Herbert's looked great. He's played, I don't know now, maybe 6 games this season. And he's looked great in probably just about every one. So I think until he shows us a game where he doesn't look too great, why should we think that he isn't maybe great? And I'm using great very loosely. I'm not saying he's a top even 10 quarterback at this point, but great as an average, which is very impressive maybe for a rookie quarterback. So with that being said, I think we can't just assume that, okay, he's coming back down. Okay, this isn't the real quarterback that he is. So I think with that being said, this passing offense, I think it's maybe performing where it's going to perform. So I think with that being said, they're going against a bottom 5 Las Vegas defense against the pass. So I think they match up very well there. And then I look at the other side of the ball. How Vegas likes to move the ball typically is that passing offense. They rank 8th on the pass and 27th via the run. So they're definitely going to look to pass the ball, and that's the Chargers' defensive strength. They're they're 12th versus the pass. So it's nothing crazy, but it's definitely where the Chargers see their strength on defense. And this Chargers defense has played pretty well this year. They just struggle to close games. And I mean, if you're going to tell me that the Chargers are going to be up 14 points again versus a team, would I bet on them to lose the game? I mean, yes, it's happened 3 times, but all day you're going to take the no on that if it's just a yes or no. So I think with that being said, I think this Chargers team is maybe a little undervalued because of that. That's kind of playing into people's perception, because this Chargers team easily could be maybe 5-2. I'd have to look at their schedule.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I lean towards the Chargers in this, even though I think honestly both these teams might have pretty good buy signals at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think both these teams are buy moving forward, especially I think John Gruden gets a bad rap for several reasons, but he's one of the best offensive schemers in the NFL. And he's just a good manager of talent, and sometimes the culture in his locker rooms gets kind of wonky. This team is bought in. They're bought in. They know what they are. They know their defense is good. They know they got to put up points. They know they got to drive the ball. And the problem is the Raiders find ways to lose. Raiders find ways to win. That's the only thing holding me off this game. Is I agree with all the points you said. Herbert is better than everyone thinks, and they can put up points and can score. Maybe the over is actually the play here. But yeah, it's just. Yeah, I just think, man, this is a tough one. I mean, I would consider teasing it both ways and just try to play and see if you middle and get both, in some kind of interesting teaser. For the rest of the season, yeah, I think both these teams are bet on. It's hard to trust both these defenses, as we know throughout the season. But if you get the Raiders in a good matchup, and that's honestly when you can bet the Raiders this season, if you've noticed, if they're playing a team with a good defensive coach and system, you can fade the Raiders. But if they're playing any team that's got a below average defense, there's no point in fading the Raiders. They're going to find ways to move the ball, even if they don't score. Like their offense is going to be solid enough to give them a chance to win and cover. So that's definitely when you want to look at the Raiders. Chargers, I'm a little more concerned about because Anthony Lynn's such a bad coach. But if they're getting points, man, with Herbert, I think that's when you got to look to buy him. Anything to add, or do you want to move on?
I'm ready to move on with that.
Steelers, Cowboys. Steelers -14. I mean, I don't even think we need to talk about the Cowboys. They benched Naducci or whatever his name is after one game. It's kind of a dead spot for the Steelers. I thought Cowboys actually played an admirable game for 3.5 quarters versus the Eagles and should have covered and almost probably even should have won. But, I mean, Steelers just are not as banged up as the Cowboys. So I'm not sure if you have an opinion. I almost think maybe you play the Steelers here. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers –
just kind of a blind play.
Yeah, this offensive line versus defensive line matchup is just heavily in Pittsburgh's favor. I know next week, if you want to consider this a look-ahead spot, I think it's something to consider. They do have a divisional game versus Cincinnati. So this could be a game they're definitely looking past. No one's really concerned about the Cowboys at this point, and Dallas is playing at home. But besides that, I do worry about Pittsburgh's offense maybe gaining a ton of margin here. Dallas's defense, it's bad versus both the pass and the run, but where it's really bad between the two is versus the run, ranking bottom 3, bottom 4 in that. And Pittsburgh's rushing offense, even their passing offense, they just haven't been electric this year. So it's hard, I think, to lay into a team to cover this by 14. Now, like if we were looking at this game and like it was Kansas City -16 or something like that, -17, I'd be all over Kansas City because I think this Dallas offense is so bad that it maybe doesn't even matter how good the defense is. So Pittsburgh's strength yes, it's pretty massive, but I'm just not sure it's as big of a deal as having a strong offense versus Dallas team when it comes to covering a bigger number. Though I do think there's a very good chance you see a defensive special teams touchdown for Pittsburgh. So I think that could be something you look at in this game.
That's a good point. Yeah, you could see a 23-10 type game and you miss the cover. But moving forward, obviously I don't think the Cowboys are really bettable right now. They're kind of like the Jags and like the Jets. Because you just don't know if you're going to get even a competent game, right? Like, can they string 4 quarters together of just not shitting the bed? So until we figure out what the Cowboys even are, maybe if Andy Dalton comes back, I don't even know. You just can't trust like versus the Eagles. They played well most of the game, like well enough to win that game, And they didn't cover anyways. Like, it's just like, okay. So you can't back a team like that. Steelers, like, everyone keeps saying Steelers are overrated every week. At what point are they not overrated? At what point are they underrated? I'm just asking. Like, I understand Ravens put up a lot of yards on the Steelers. I think their defense can be exposed down the field. They had a big injury to a linebacker 2 weeks ago. I get all that. Their offense has underperformed at times, but it is very capable of, driving the ball, running the ball, passing the ball down the field. Like, it's capable. It hasn't shown it that it can do it consistently. But as far as the rest of the season, Steelers, they are +4 at the +2 versus the Titans. Like how are they're not overbought because their lines are short. Like, at what at what point is it the narrative is just wrong? Like, it's not, like, I don't know.
I think that's a really strong point. I'm with you. I think they are maybe underrated. They're 6-1 against the spread this year. So, just in terms of the market and how they're pricing them, the market's underpricing them in 6 of 7 matchups. And I know that's not necessarily the case. Games can flip one way or the other in the, split second. But, they are 6-1 against the spread. And I know a couple of those covers are really close, but, good teams get it done. And so, they're third in the NFL this year against the spread margin average. So I do think maybe they're catching up, but, they definitely have been underrated in terms of the market so far this season.
Actually, to your point, I think this is a great game to have the Cowboys cover and continue to lose some steam on the Steelers so you can get some value moving forward. Next up, Dolphins, Cardinals. Dolphins are now +4 traveling to Arizona. What's your opinion on this game?
What did Tua show us last week? I think that's the first thing. I know that's not the whole cap, but I don't know. Yes, I know we were on the Rams last week, and that was a whiff. The big thing there was just Goff could not handle the Miami defense, the pressure. But and I know it's not just, you can't compare apples to oranges because, they're going to scheme differently for Kyler Murray. But Kyler Murray would react to that pressure a whole lot differently. He would use his legs. And, that's some spots where we want to back Arizona. He tends to look to run. So I don't think they're going to be able to use that advantage that they had versus them as much. And where we saw the advantage for the Rams even last week was their run game. And I think we'll see that again maybe this week with Arizona. They rank 4th rushing offense this season, and Miami's still dead last in that statistic. So I think this Arizona offense should see some success. But I'm still not super sold on that because these corners are very good. Howard and Byron Jones. Those are two probably close to top 10 cornerbacks, honestly, in the league. It's definitely the best combo in the league, in my opinion, for outside cornerbacks. So I think with those two guys, if they can keep Kyler in the pocket and have him throwing at those guys, I don't love it because I don't think Kyler's thrown the ball too great this season. So I do have some concerns there. But I think if you're taking this number, you're banking that Tua is just as good as what we've seen maybe Fitzpatrick show us so far this year, maybe a little bit worse. And I think from what we saw last week, I definitely would want to fade that. So I think this Arizona defense, they've been pretty decent this year. So Arizona also is coming off a bye, whereas Miami had 2 weeks of prep last week for their game versus the Rams. So I think that also definitely helps Tua in that way, and just the whole team and how they schemed for the Rams. Now Arizona gets 2 weeks for Tua. I think it's just a flip of the game script, and I'm definitely leaning towards Arizona here.
Yeah, I think I love Arizona here, and part of the reason why is kind of your handicap to start the season with Kyler Murray playing better with a up front that can get pressure because he can neutralize it with his legs. And running quarterbacks, that's where they maximize their skill set because they buy time, they find different angles, they find lanes. Like, they're not worried about X, Y, and Z. They're playing in a rhythm, right? Like a basketball player. Like, you step into a 3 as you shoot it. Like, when you're too wide open, what do? You miss it, right? Like, that's Kyler Murray. Is when he's running, he's at his best. He's going to be running a little bit compared to some of his other games. So that in and of itself makes me like the Cardinals. Tua being what we think is a below average quarterback, not ready to start this season. And remember, when's the last time he played college football? He was injured with his hip. I don't remember the date. Hasn't it been like a year and a half? like as far as like playing live football.
I want to say that's what I heard. Yes.
Yeah. So like, I mean, he hadn't played college football for over a year and a half, and he went and played the Rams. Didn't have to do anything to win that game because Goff gave it away, and now he's going on the road to Arizona, who is very capable defense versus a middling offense, anyways. It's a terrible spot for Miami coming off that huge undeserved win. I mean, it was deserved in one fashion, but like you said, Cardinals off the bye. Like, man, it's just like this might be my favorite play of the week. It's just there's no situation where I'm taking the Dolphins in this spot. Ideally, I would love this number at 3 more than 4, but even so, I mean, the 4 is predicated on basically is Tua going to play well. If Tua plays well, Miami can cover the 4. If Tua is not going to play well, no chance. Not going to cover that 4. So that's kind of where I would still bet the 4, but yeah. Moving forward on the season, what's your opinion on Dolphins? When can you bet on? Is it just a Tua thing? Like, do we know what Tua is?
One thing I just wanted to add quickly before we move on from that matchup, the Cardinals were actually a look-ahead spread on this game of -6. So this moved down 2 points after the Dolphins' performance. And I just don't think that performance was something it just was a very, maybe you could call it maybe a good matchup defensively versus Goff, whatever you want to say. But that team, I don't think just looked great out there by any means. I mean, they had a defensive touchdown, pretty much 2 defensive touchdowns, almost special team. I think they had a special teams touchdown. So, I mean, just a very deceiving score. I'm not saying that win was undeserved, but I mean, to upgrade them 2 points in the market off that, maybe that -6 was wrong, but it just seems a little fishy to me.
That's actually a very good point. So good that I'm actually going to give out a free bet for Aggressive Sportfolio right now. And I'm going to bet it myself as I do it, is let's just do it. Cardinals -4. Let's do a 1. It's -113. So let's do 1.3 units to win 1 unit. We like using percent, but some people prefer the unit language. So we'll say unit. Is that something you agree with, Corey? I know you lean Cardinals, but
I think it's definitely a number I'm going to be looking to possibly bet this week. So I definitely think it's a good spot to put in the Aggressive Sportfolio. Yeah,
and maybe we're wrong about Tua, and that's fine, but I mean, everything else lines up. Like, even if Tua is good, I think this still has a 50-50 shot of covering. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm comfortable playing it. Next up, we have Saints at Bucks. Man, when I saw this line, it's +5 now. It was +5.5. I mean, it's 5.5. It's not great, but man, I like the Saints. Like, I know Antonio Brown's coming back his first game. It's a rematch of the game before. Bucks coming off Monday night. I know Bucks are at home, but like, I don't know. Like, giving Saints points just gives me like these games are always tough. Saints versus Bucks. Like, I don't know. Like, just screams like, why are you giving the Saints so many points? Like, it's a division game. It's kind of like Steelers Ravens. Like, you never give that game more than 3 points. Like, it doesn't matter. It's always 3 because 70% of the time the game's a 3-point game. So getting Steelers +4 is like you have to play it. That's kind of how this game appears to me at first glance. Tell me I'm wrong.
So I guess the first thing I looked at this matchup, and I was hoping that I could possibly back the Buccaneers in this before seeing the spread. The Saints are a team I think the market is still, overvaluing. I haven't liked what I've seen from them this year, offensively or even defensively. And I think a lot of the offensive struggles maybe can be attributed to Michael Thomas. I mean, he's a very important offensive player just in terms of what he produces as well as what he opens up for that offense. So I think I'm not sure if he's going to be back for this game. I don't think he is. So I worry a little bit there. And then their defense, it has started to improve. They were missing some pieces. So I think in general, the Saints were a team I've mentioned to some people that I'm looking to maybe go against. But here's the thing that really confused me on this line. And I agree with you. It just seems large. The look ahead on this game was Bucks -4.5. Now the Bucks go up and they beat the Giants by 2 in a game they were favored by 13. And then we see the Saints go out and they beat the Bears by 3 in a game they were favored by 4. So I'm not saying you can just totally look at those performances and completely paste the new line. But I mean, the Bucks underperformed by, 11 points against the spread, whereas the Saints underperformed by 1.5. Nonetheless, I mean, we moved this line to -5.5 when it opened back up. I'm very confused for me. I thought this line would come down a little bit after the Buccaneers kind of disappointing performance. And I mean, you can say, oh, the Buccaneers are getting player X, player Y back. But I mean, that's always calculated into a look ahead. So it just really confused me on the line. I definitely do think it's a little large. I thought this number would come out maybe 3.5. So I think to your point, catching 5, I definitely lean towards the Saints.
Yeah, and I think Bucks probably win this game, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I do like the Bucks. I mean, you know me, I like the Bucks on the season. I might have to think on this one. My initial instinct was Saints. But on the season, like, and I hear what you're saying that the Saints are like over rated value in general, like we saw with the Bears game. You know, like Bears had every chance to win that game. But I mean, like, they've still done it all without Michael Thomas. Like, regardless of spread, I mean, this team does win games. Like, they are the team that's been in the NFC Championship game 3 years in a row. Like, that's, you know, like, there's a level of, are they as good as they were last year? I don't know. Are they at the peak performance? Probably not. But, like, where they could go fairly quickly is being the best team in the NFC. Like, they're like a one big step over the lump from getting to that position. Like, and that's where it's hard to fade the Saints in general, because is this the week? Like, is that the week? Like, when is the week? Like, you know, it's going to happen. They're going to have a 3 to 4 week game. If Michael Thomas comes back, that they're going to look really good. They're going to look like the best team in the NFL.
Right.
They're not going to be the best team in the NFL, but they're going to look like it. And it's just like, when is that going to happen? Because it seems like it's going to happen either this week or next week. Like, one of these weeks, it's going to happen. So that's kind of why I'm like still kind of like waiting for the Saints. Like, I want to get on that train. I want this train to start. And getting +5 is like, well, even if it doesn't start this week, like, you know, if they just kind of hang around, they have a chance. But last year, Saints, when they played the Bucs, I think Saints got stomped in Tampa. So food for thought on that. Yeah, so do you have any opinion on Saints on the season? Like, I know you're a little more bullish or bearish than me.
Yeah, I am a little bearish, but I think you make a really strong point. I mean, this team definitely has a top 5, top 10 quarterback in terms of leadership, top 5, top 10 coaching staff, and then a top 5, top 10 just organization culture. So I think all those things being said, this isn't a team that, I mean, to your point, they're still winning games. Now, the thing is, they're a team I don't want to probably back when they're giving points, but this is a spot where we're grabbing 5. And I think to your point, they're a competitive team even without Michael Thomas. So I think to that point, I think that, I mean, even more so makes me lean Saints.
Nice. Yeah, and then on Bucks on this season, I don't want to brag. I'm 8-0 in picking Bucks games. So is that good? I think it's good. But it's because I've watched the Bucks for 20 years and then NFC South and been betting on sports now for 10 years. So, like, I just know this team, the culture, the dynamic, the changes. Like, it's unlike any Bucks team we've ever seen, which is good, which is why I'm high on them. I mean, they're definitely a bet-on team. Like, it doesn't matter who they play. It's all about the situation, their health, the matchup. Get good game plan. You're going to get defensive turnovers. Like, you're going to get those things like bank on. It's just about the situation. Like, the Giants was not a good situation. They're playing the Saints next week on a short week. Like, Giants have an underrated defense. Like, all Giants needed to do was get up early. And, Giants were going to cover no problem. Like, that's just what needed to happen. It's exactly what happened. For this game, it's because I could see it going either way. I can see a Bucks blowout too. This could be where the Saints just kind of get exposed. But the reason I don't think it's going to coming back, like, you kind of got to welcome them in, get them situated. Like, I don't know if that's going to take a week or two. But yeah, definitely finding spots to bet on the Bucks as the season progresses at low lines, to me, is very appealing on the season. I wouldn't fade the Bucks too much unless the line's 12.5 versus the Giants on the road for no reason, like in that kind of spot without Chris Godwin. So moving forward to one last game, Patriots at Jets. Oh man, 7.5. I mean, what's your opinion on this game?
I think I'm leaning Jets. Now, here's the thing, though. I think the Jets actually match up pretty well with New England in terms of New England's strength. They're the 5th best rushing offense. That's the one spot this New York team has been, above average, actually. They're 10th against the rush. Their defensive line versus the rush is 3rd. Everywhere else, yes, they're bottom 10 in the league. But they're actually pretty good versus the rush. And New England has shown that they can't pass the ball at all right now. Yes, it might be a little different versus the Jets, but still, I think this is a spot where it's like, could the Jets maybe win this? It's hard to say, though, because now the Jets, we've seen them right after this game on Sunday, they traded away some pieces. It seems like they're unloading. It's complete, we're getting Trevor Lawrence maybe now. And we saw the Patriots make a trade, I think, for a receiver. Now, I'm not saying he's going to make an impact, but I think that shows that they're maybe not just completely selling out on the season. Though, this receiver isn't a big ad, so it's not like it's saying a whole lot. But I do like it better than them trading away a receiver for sure. So I think with that being said, I think there's the Jets organization saying, hey, we're selling. And then the Pats, I'm just not sure they're ready to sell yet. I know they definitely were last week versus the Bills, which, by no surprise, no one was thinking they were. So I'm not ready to think that they are going to maybe sell out like some people are trying to say they would maybe this week. So I think with that being said, that makes me look at the Patriots. But I think from a matchup standpoint, getting 7.5, this Patriots offense has looked really bad. I don't know. I'm tempted to take the Jets, but it just feels so wrong.
It feels wrong because it is wrong. I don't love the Patriots here, but no way can I take the Jets in this spot. This team has covered one game out of 8, 7, right? Am I right?
Correct. I think they're 1-8 or 1-7.
Now they're playing Bill Belichick. I understand the matchup. I understand the Patriots have been trending, but if you look at the last 3 games of the Patriots, this game from the game before, they're trending up. They weren't great versus the Bills, but they found some offense. They found some stops. They found some opportunities. Now you could say the same thing about the Jets, but the Jets, they're also super banged up. They've been trading away players. Jets are in a middle of crap. Patriots. I flirted with the cute idea that Patriots almost on the cusp of being over. But I don't think Bill Belichick has it in him to suck on purpose. He's just so more than a mastermind of epic proportions. He's a mastermind of I don't lose if I don't have to. It's why they never lose games they should win. When they're in a position to win, they don't. How many times do Patriots lose a game on the last play? Weird shit that almost never happens. And it's because Belichick is just so I'm not going to be the reason I lose. That's Belichick. I am not the guy who's always been in position to win if they play as they're supposed to or as they're capable or whatever. So I'm backing off me getting cute and thinking, maybe the Patriots let this game go and whatever. No. It's the Jets. It's a division. They hate the Jets. They're figuring out how to get Cam Newton going again. Jets are not going to have a good performance. They had all season. There's no way I'm laying barely over a touchdown. It's just or giving a touchdown to the Jets. So I think this is hold your nose and take Patriots moment. Kind of like last week, which I recommended. On deaf ears, mind you. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I think picking the Jets here is it's just a disaster. It's gonna hurt so bad if it's completely wrong.
Yeah,
it's like one of those games if you actually bet it and then they lose by 24, you're gonna be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that? It's just because it's not even that good of a number. If it was 10.5, if it was 11.5, was there a look ahead line on this like 4 weeks ago? 5, like I wonder like, what was it then? This is all predicated on Jets didn't play that bad. Patriots have been playing bad. Like, but what are these teams consistently over the course of the season? Like, Patriots aren't the team that lost the 49ers. Jets aren't the team that covered the Bills. Like, they're not at their best or their worst. They're somewhere in between. And yeah, I think this line should be at least 9.5, if not 10. And that's what, like, yeah.
I've been someone pounding the table that, like, if you can't look at Jets, you got to look at the other side. And I'm like, I'm still believe you can't look at the Jets with the moves they're making from an organizational standpoint. So I think with that being said, though, I look at this in the matchup. And I mean, as long as the matchup looks decent, I want the other side. But yes, it's Belichick. Yes, it's all that. But I just struggle. I think this Jets team is most exploitable through the pass game. And Cam's, I mean, as much as they may be trending upward, he's thrown for 0 touchdowns, less than 200 yards in each of the last 3 games, 5 interceptions. I just worry there. And I think this Jets team has enough on the defensive line to slow the Patriots, kind of muddy this game up. So I'm by no means saying I want to take the Jets, but I just think those, I mean, cancel each other out enough for me. I'll need to see enough from like just kind of fundamental maybe standpoint to really want to take the Patriots in this spot, I guess.
For sure. And I hear that fundamental argument. And moving forward, is a Jets the team, like, are they a team you can back? I mean, I think you could back the Jets with Sam Darnold generally, but not with Adam Gase and the dysfunction of the organization, like you said, right?
Right. Yeah. I think you hit that spot on. I mean, the Jets aren't a team I'm looking to bet on until, I mean, they string together 2 games maybe. Give me 2 games where you just look competent. And I mean, yeah, you can say they maybe did versus the Bills and then last week as well, but I really don't think so. I mean, both those games they could have lost by a lot more potentially. So I don't know. I need 2 games strung together before I would want to actually back them, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And then the Patriots, I think we're going to see a resurgence here in the end of the season, like kind of back to what we saw when they beat the Dolphins and Seattle, or played well versus Seattle. Is I think you're going to have a little bit of like the reality of the Patriots is they don't have the talent. Like, they lost so much talent in the offseason, on defense especially, and then obviously they don't have any weapons on offense except running backs. Like, they're kind of a one-note team this year. Like, if they can run it down your throat, they're going to play okay, like, and get an early lead. Like, that's just kind of how they are. So if you can pinpoint those spots, that's when you can bet the Patriots. But like, if they're playing a good team or like a team that can take advantage of that defense easily, like a Chiefs type team, like, don't even touch it, go the other way. So that's kind of my macro view on the Patriots. Like, I think they're going to be bettable, like, the rest of the season, more so than people think right now. If Cam's still the quarterback and all that stuff. But yeah, anything else to add for this week or on any teams?
I think the last thing I'd say about the Patriots is that I still think they're poor, and maybe you can say extremely poor, whatever you want to say, poor man's Ravens. And I think if they're playing from ahead, it poses really well for them. So that's a spot maybe where we want to look at them this week. But I also, with that being said, they need to be able to run the ball, much like the Ravens. So I'm not saying they can't run the ball versus the Jets, but from a matchup standpoint, it doesn't look as great as maybe it does versus other teams. We take a look maybe like last week versus the Bills. The Bills have a very poor rush defense, and we saw New England be able to move the ball in that game. And I mean, they covered that game and probably should have maybe won it outright. So I think just kind of looking at that standpoint and just seeing how the game flow will go, I think much to your point, there's definitely will be spots to take the Patriots still. Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Corey. And thanks, Carmination. We are signing off this week, week 9. Check out the Discord. Premium picks will be coming throughout the week and into Sunday. I like this week a lot. Like, now that we talked through it all, I think there's a lot of opportunities. I feel much more confident about some sides and some opportunities this week than I did last week. I think that would probably go for you too, Corey, and I imagine Brett and the rest of the Karma gang. So yeah, tune in and check out articles coming out and our picks as well as the teams we're going to be playing and sides and all that good stuff. Thanks, guys, and until next week, signing off.
And that's the closing bell.